Alrighty, y'all. Welcome back to We Drink and We Watch Things. I am Mackenzie.
And my name's Lemar.
And we are obviously drinking and talking about shit that we watch. So, Lemar, start us off. What are we drinking today?
So today we are drinking my famous peanut butter chocolate old fashioned. I discovered this at a bar called Dumont's Down Low. Just kidding, assholes. We're filming this on the same day as the last episode.
And clearly I'm trashed because I asked that shit again.
Yes.
And I was like, by the way, tell me the same drink you just told me about.
So hopefully you listened to last week's episode where we did the first 5 of this random-ass top 10 Halloween films that we found on cbsnews.com. Never forget. But yeah, so we're here to round out the last 5 and throw our picks in. What are your thoughts? I mean, what are your biggest takeaways from 30 minutes ago from the first 5 that we went through? What's on your mind?
Man, we disagree a lot with this list. It's, I think, the big takeaway. I think we'll do a little better in this half because we did purposely eliminate some of the ones we didn't like out of the gate because I didn't want to spend much time on them, and somehow we still spent a fuck ton of time on them. But yeah, I think we don't really agree with this list for all the limitations of it. But we did have some gems on there, and I think we got some good ones out of it, some good replacements out of it. What were your replacements again?
So like the ones that we went over so far to start, we talked about. First, we started with family-friendly films. So we had Halloween Town, a.k.a. Burning Garbage from 1998.
Piping hot garbage.
Yeah. We had The Witches from 1990, which we did disagree on.
We did.
I liked it. You didn't like it. I didn't want it in my top 10, but I do enjoy the film. We talked about It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Fuck yes.
Which Mackenzie was a huge fan of, and I enjoyed for the first time through, but because of runtime, I cut it out of my personal top 10. We talked about The Nightmare Before Christmas. A little bit of controversy there over whether it's a Halloween or Christmas movie.
Like I said before.
So Mackenzie kept that on your list,
Kept that on my list.
And I took it off of mine just because of the time of year that I like to watch it.
Weirdo.
And the last one that we talked about before we wrapped up was Scream, which we both love, and that stayed in, correct?
Mm-hmm. It did. That was a good one. It just also reminded me of The Craft, if I recall. So I don't know that it was an official replacement, because I like Scream. I wouldn't replace it, but I did also think it was worthy of a mention.
So out of the 5 that we went through, I actually replaced 4. That won't be the same this week. I liked a lot more of the adult picks in this list, but I replaced 4 out of 5, so I threw in Beetlejuice, Shaun of the Dead, Cabin in the Woods, probably our most controversial discussion. We won't bring it back. We've talked way too much about Cabin in the Woods. And replacing Halloween Town, Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Excellent choice.
Tim Curry getting his 3rd call out in 2 weeks.
Well,
and who knows, maybe he'll get more by the time this is over.
Probably, because actually, God, now this list gets harder.
You threw Dark Crystal on your list. It's not even over.
I was like, this list, we're not even over, and I can't get through this list. Okay, so what I replaced was, of course, Hocus Pocus. I brought in hot as a replacement to Halloween Town. Family friendly, still a really good Halloween flick, much more enjoyable in my opinion. I also replaced, The Witches with The Shining. Did not think that it was a similar vibe at all, but definitely on my list. Definitely something that I think is a Halloween spooky feeling vibe. And then I, again, honorable mentioned The Craft. I wouldn't replace Scream with it, but I honorable mentioned that. So I really, 3? I really, quote unquote, replaced or mentioned out of the 5.
Yeah, and I think it's worth reiterating that these are the thing about these lists. It's very personal, and there's no right or wrong answers except for Halloween Town.
Except for Night Before Christmas, which is in fact wrong.
So when we say that's why we're giving so many, we put it in our notes of just let's talk about all these other films in passing briefly because there's so many out there that you should watch. And if it makes it into your top 10, that's great. Halloween Town is the only one that we don't think should be in anyone's top 10.
We 100% agree that should get the fuck out of the top 10 list. So with all that being said, we need to get into the next 5 and decide if we're going to keep those or replace those. We're going to stick to list order at this point because we're in the more adult range now. We wanted to get over the kid stuff. So.
And we were giving you guys the actual numbers last episode. For those that are taking notes in your Trapper Keeper or what have you, we've got Scream is in at number 10 on this list.
Which we thought was surprising,
Hard to disagree.
Honestly.
Halloween is at number 9.
Number 9.
The Witches was at number 5. It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown was at number 4, and The Nightmare Before Christmas was at number 3. So we got the number 2 and 1 still on the board.
Yep.
And we've got 3 others right in the middle there. So you want to tell us what this list? We don't need to re-explain this list at all, right? Like where this came from.
If you haven't heard the part 1 though, honestly, go back.
And listen to it. If you're like, what the hell is this list? Please
and I know that some of you are monsters like Lemar who listen to podcasts out of order. I don't understand you, but
I just want to know how it ends.
I can't respect it. I don't get it. The type A in my brain does not understand you, but do not keep listening. Go back, listen to the first half first. I just think you're going to be confused otherwise. And also I don't want to re-explain all the same shit.
Fair.
Next step is we're going to go to the next one on the list. Like I said, back to getting back into order, which would be number 8 on the list, which is The Exorcist, 1973. This is, by all accounts, really a classic. It's a classic horror film. Whether it's a Halloween film is up for debate, I suppose. We can talk about that. But definitely a classic horror film. Groundbreaking for the time. Life-altering at the time. Not something that people even wanted in theaters. Had all kinds of rating issues, production issues. There's horror stories coming out of this production. Incredible, I think, piece of work in film, cinema, period, regardless. But does it deserve to be on this list? Let's talk.
Yeah, let's talk. I have only seen The Exorcist all the way through front to back, at most twice. I think it might just be once. I've always seen it in bits and pieces. I saw a little bit when I was a kid, saw a little bit more when I was a teenager in college. I never seemed to catch it in its entirety. But I sat down and watched it in its entirety last week, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt, I think it belongs on my list.
Yes!
Because it's a classic. For its time, not just in its time though, it's a revolutionary film and it does what horror movies should do, which not only does it frighten you, but it makes it feel real. And you're not just watching the plot of the movie. Yes, it revolves around demonic possession and these dark forces and whatnot, but the really scary and heartbreaking and tragic part of the film is watching this mother have no idea how to help her daughter. And that to me was like, I teared up twice during the movie of I can't imagine what it's like to be a mom watching your child. The first half of the film, the first 60 minutes is just her going to doctors and being poked and prodded and having these surgical procedures and the daughter screaming in pain for them to try to figure out what's going on. And that is just heartbreaking to watch before you even get into what's really going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a heartbreaking film. It's a visually really stunning but difficult film. I love how dark it is, which even from like a technology perspective in the 70s feels hard to do. I mean, I obviously was not on a film set at this time, but it feels like these would be hard shots to get. Some of them are iconic. Some of the shots in the room, from the street looking up at the house. Some of these things are just really, truly classics. So I am thrilled to hear that this made it onto the list. I'm super shocked, by the way, to hear that you hadn't seen it all the way through more than once. This is one of my classics, and I think this goes back to what I was saying in the prior episode of I saw a lot of horror movies at a very young age, and my tolerance was real high, but also I think my standards were high as a result. I love this movie. This is, to me, such a classic. I love the supernatural around it. I always love that. I love that. I think that's interesting. I think that's Halloween-y. As a born and raised Catholic, I love a little bit of the Catholic lore to it, actually. Yeah. Not a practicing Catholic, but I definitely was raised in that. And that was something that was the most interesting to me as I grew up, to be honest. Those were the things that I researched. I think I've established I was into the spooky, so I would look into the exorcism and the rites and like, how does this work and how does this happen and some of these things. And it was really cool at a young age to see that on film, come out on film, and how they interpreted that was really interesting to me, but gnarly.
Yeah. And I think that this is not my original thought at all. This is from a horror documentary that I watched, so I am paraphrasing somebody here. But the cool thing about The Exorcist is at this point, whether you're a fan of the genre or not, you've probably seen some exorcism films in your time, and now we're desensitized to it, and we forget with this one why it was, to use the word again, revolutionary. of at 1973, people weren't making movies about demonic possession and invoking the Catholic Church into plots of horror films.
No.
It wasn't something you
No.
did because it pissed a lot of people off. This movie only opened in about like 25 theaters nationwide. And so now for it to be considered one of the greatest horror films of all time just shows its reach, and it shows just how you can take this concept of something that, I don't know, nowadays I don't know if we would think that a demonic possession would be relatable or realistic or something that we would
Wouldn't we?
believe.
Because so this is something that I thought of when we were talking about this list in particular. One, I totally agree with everything you said. I think we made this topic accessible at a time where it was not accessible. So again, it didn't open widely, but word spread. It was a controversial film at the time, for sure. And then it spread, and now again, like you said, it grew to be one of the greatest horror films of all time. And I almost think that's indisputable. But I also think it's a lasting piece of lore for us. It's something that is still interesting. When you think about, there's the exorcism of Emily Rose, which was in the 2000s-ish, and that's obviously decades after this film is made, and we're still revisiting that topic. That was one that I thought was very well done and like really lands, I think. Laura Linney is in that and is incredible, and it gives a similar energy. It is not at all the same story. It is not at all the same plot. It doesn't really rob from the original, but it is another exorcism story that's really interesting. But also, meanwhile, I think you have ones that do a really bad job of it.
Yeah.
And you have ones that are still really interested in it, but do a really poor job of actually showing you anything. There was a documentary recently, The Devil and Father Amaranth or something. I don't remember how to say his name, but, loosely associated with the exorcism that inspired The Exorcist. And they really pitched that as part of like why this documentary was made and what they found and all these things. And they didn't really find anything. If you watch it, it's a couple hours of, I don't know why I spent this time on this, but The Exorcist really holds up as a result, as being really unique and original and telling this really visually stimulating, if very difficult story.
Yeah. And visually, not just visually stimulating, but I guess because I had only remembered at least seeing it in pieces, I didn't get the full vision of what was happening, of how these two characters of this young 12-year-old, 13-year-old girl and this priest who is dealing with a crisis of faith and losing his mom, how the circumstances lead to them meeting, and he's going to basically save her life. And I never really put that together, but on watching, I'm just like, dude, this is a fucking film. This isn't a horror movie. This is a film. And it's cool how it opens in Iraq, and you get this dig site, and you're like, what does this have to do with anything? But that ends up being like the priest that comes back later in the film, if this is your first episode. And again, if you skip to part 2, that's your own damn fault, but we are spoiling all of these films. Yeah, so the fact that it opens there, it's easy to make a horror movie that takes place in a cabin in the woods and a bunch of teenagers get killed. It takes a lot more effort to make something that's nation spanning or continent spanning and having these elaborate set pieces.
Has a plot and a trajectory to it and an ethos about it, I think, that is pervasive throughout the film. It's cohesive. It has a theme. It has an aesthetic, both visually and from a plot standpoint. Yeah. So, I agree. This is a film. Yeah. And maybe now you understand a little better why I hate some of these other ones as much as I do. Because it is much harder to do this. And I think this is more interesting.
Yeah. I think that you'll find that on my list, there's probably some like popcorn flicks and things that I just enjoy watching. And
which there's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Yeah, and a lot. But if we were to say what are my favorite films, that would be a totally different list, I think. Right. But with this one, I think another thing that stood out to me was it's not just good story and also special effects. And I understand why people who watch it for the first time now would say, oh, that's not scary. It doesn't scare me. And again, you're desensitized at this point. If you saw this was the first possession film you ever saw, you'd be freaked the F out. But aside from just the scares, the horror, the visual effects, This movie made me uncomfortable. Like, we talk about, you remember the term, like, torture porn, and how it was just, like, this terrible genre in the mid-2000s of just uncomfortable things being put on the screen. Or you could talk about body horror, like The Fly, and other films like that. I don't know that anything's made me feel as awkward as a 12-year-old masturbating with a crucifix and then sticking her mom's face in the blood. That is, just saying it out loud makes me feel icky. And then to go on and win Academy Awards is bonkers to me.
Again, to your point about how it was released in so few theaters, and also people were fighting the rating, whether it should be shown, and then also it was making people sick in the theater. Like, I don't remember if you heard about those.
That was like the first viral marketing.
Yeah, it was
people
the first
are
viral
throwing
marketing. People
up
were getting like pulled out of theaters by paramedics. Like, it was bananas. But it got nominated for 10 awards, and then it won. What did it win? It was adapted screenplay. You said, and then sound mixing or something, which, by the way, makes total sense because of just some of the vocals,
the things that come out of that girl's mouth,
while these other things are happening in the room and in the space, and like just a feat of shooting and filming and mixing for sure, if nothing else, groundbreaking in a lot of ways. But still, again, like, while being controversial and being a film, but think about like how our tolerance has gone down or gone way up, I should say, because of these people literally getting ill in theaters at seeing the same movie that we watch now. And we're like, I mean, we're still grossed out by it, but try to imagine watching it 50 years ago and being like, holy shit.
I had to go and look just when you're speaking about the sound in this and the voices coming out of Regan's mouth and all these different things. I had to go and search because I was curious. I was like, how old was Linda Blair in this? Because she's playing a 12-year-old. She looks a little older. And I think she was only 14. So it's like this kid comes in and knocks it out of the park. She's playing this possessed character. And it's not just moving your mouth at the right time in sync with the audio and whatnot. And I'm sure that's post. But the facial expressions and the body language and it's insane this many years on. How this, in any, I don't want to say any other actor or actress's hands, this could have been a silly, terrible B movie if you didn't get the right person in that role, and Linda Blair killed it.
And just, she totally committed to it, and especially at a young age again, but also, I mean, she committed to it so much and the material was so difficult. Like, one of the things I remember reading about was like, Max, what's his face, Vaughn something, forgot his lines listening to her. You commit to her dialogue in such a way. So like that I think speaks to like the commitment and the presence on the set.
Okay, I thought you were going a darker route with that. No, this isn't funny. I'm not trying to make a joke. I thought you were going to talk about how committed she was because literally, like, I just heard an interview with her where she talked about how her spinal column was dislocated during the scene where she was like flopping up and down because she was in a brace. Yeah. And it's very similar to what happened in Jaws, where the actress at the beginning was being just torn in the ocean from this brace that she was in. And the same thing happened to her. And she said, yeah, like I still have back pain to this day because they like fractured part of my spine in that. So that's not as happy of a memory. But again, it's like this girl has made this enduring legacy of one of the greatest horror films of all time.
But yeah, by sacrificing everything to committing to the role. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's needless to say, it was a classic. It angered a lot of people, religious zealots and just devout alike. But I think as a film, it's incredible. I watch it every year, 100% every year on Halloween. And other times not. Like, just to watch it. It's a great movie. Yeah.
So, anyway, as it comes to the top 10s, I'm going to replace it with Piranha. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to leave it.
I was like, that's it. You're out. We're done.
I'll leave this one on my list for sure.
Yeah, I think it would be disrespectful to replace it. I completely understand why it's here. Placement is always a debate, but I think it's a great one.
I think you go higher with The Exorcist. I think that number 8 is pretty high. I could see how you're dating it a little bit, maybe because it's older, so maybe that's why it's... But again, we don't put any stock in this person's list anyway.
We super don't.
So let's move on to Joel's number 7. What do we got?
We're just not going to try to learn his name, and we're going to say it different every time.
For all I know, it's a lady. It's Joal, so it might be Joal or Joel.
Well, Doal can fuck off too, because she did a bad job. So, yeah.
They did a bad job. They did a bad job.
And we're going to talk about their number 7 choice now. Like you said, Blair Witch Project, about which I have a lot of fucking feelings.
About which?
That wasn't even intentional. That worked out great. Yeah, I hate it. 1999. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so, no, I'm actually curious to hear. You straight up hate this film, or you hate the fact that it's on this list?
Both.
Okay, let's hear why you hate it.
On this list.
I
hate everything about this. Okay, so this is another one that I think is maybe a little surprising that I hadn't watched because I refused.
Okay.
But I refused. This is where the Aquarius rebel comes out in me, where I was like, fuck you, everyone who is watching this. I'm not going to watch this thing that you people watch. And I do that every now and then. I dig my heels in. This was one of them. Was not going to watch it. Yeah. It's on this list. And so I watched it. Also, I had generally been feeling like, okay, I better see what this is all about. I purposely didn't really do a lot of revisiting research prior to watching it because I just wanted to watch it cold, see what happens. I live tweeted this shit. Would you like a teaser trailer?
I would love it.
I think so. There is no live tweeting because this movie is so fucking boring, in all caps. Also, the rebel in me was like, I'll never watch this, and here I fucking am. Thanks, Joel, whatever. There are people fighting. They're not really selling it. This is not going to take long, by the way, because I'm almost done.
Okay.
Oh my God, rocks, so scary. Oh my God, sticks, so scary. I am so bored. Seriously, so bored. And then at the end, I capped us off with, okay, but literally nothing happens. Are you fucking kidding me? And I still at this moment feel the exact same way. This movie sucks.
Okay. Let me start with this. I understand why this is a divisive film and why folks would not like it. How much of your disenjoyment of it was based on its reputation alone?
You can say loathing, and none because I don't really remember the reaction at the time, to be honest. And I purposely didn't, like I said, I didn't research it because I didn't want to be tainted by that. I remember it being a major pop culture moment. I just don't remember what the sentiment was coming out of it. Yeah. I remember people being like, you have to see this. Yeah. Not because, oh, it's so great or, oh, it's so bad. I just remember everyone feeling like you should see it and me deciding not to. And then, so I watched it cold and I genuinely thought more was going to happen.
Were you watching the whole time? I know you were live tweeting, but you weren't multitasking.
No. Other than when I say live tweeting, I mean, I have my phone in my hand to write a reaction.
Okay.
I'm not doing anything else. Yeah. And so I straight up watched it, committed to it, hated it.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair.
But I actually had another recommendation from somebody recently to watch As Above, So Below. I'm not recommending that either. It gives me a very similar vibe to this movie. It's like a documentarian kind of faux documentary style. Yeah. And you're following them very closely. You have a very limited lens, which I know is a film choice. I'm not saying I don't understand. I'm saying that I hate it. And I don't find it interesting. I didn't find it interesting here. I didn't find it interesting in As Above, So Below. The tendril of something interesting is this sort of story that is supposed to be this Maryland-based story about the Blair Witch, and it's supposed to be rooted in some lore and whatever, and she says this story at the beginning and blah, blah, blah. And then the way that it ends, he's in this corner, which is something that this particular person supposedly did to their victims. Yeah. And to me, that's, again, the only tendril throughout. That's the only tendril to the plot. It's it's this quick. Right? It's a snap of the finger.
So fun fact, which you guys can Google this and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm reasonably sure that the scenes at the beginning when the townspeople there in, I think it's Burkittsville, Maryland, I want to say, when they're being interviewed, I believe most of that was improv. They just told people, pretend that there's a witch. What do you want to tell us?
So 90% of the story
is off of improv. That. That's why. And then they were like, oh, that's a cool concept. Like the corner thing. Let's use that. And that's why there's one person says there was a man in the woods who was murdering people. Another person says it's a female witch. And that's why there's these 4 different forms of lore that get incorporated.
For a neighborhood lore or a town
lore.
Right,
yeah, urban legend, right? Everyone has a different take on it.
It makes perfect sense that the story would not be cohesive in that way. Also, I did read about it. The script is 90% improv.
Yes.
Whatever. But again, it's not interesting. I also even think, to me, their interaction seems fake to me. If you're trying to sell me on this documentary style of this trio of people filming this, and like the footage itself doesn't seem fake. I feel like they are acting.
I mean, you can.
The acting.
I think it's fair that you have that opinion. I think that depending on the viewer, you might think that it's good or bad acting. For what it's worth, I remember when the movie came out, there were people who were calling the police about we need to find, like, people thought that was legit. Like, these people were missing in Maryland. If you want to say the acting is bad, but I mean, it was convincing at the time, at least. I will say, you know, this revolutionized, we talked about Scream revolutionizing or bringing life back to the slasher. This one revolutionized found footage. And it wasn't the first found footage. I remember seeing the last broadcast. But, I mean, without this, I don't think you get your Paranormal Activities. I don't think you get your Rex. So, revolutionary, absolutely. I put this on a revolutionary film. But, like, is it one of my favorites? No.
Just because something is the impetus for a bunch of other crap to be made, does that mean it's good? I'm sorry. No,
I mean,
that was purposely incendiary.
Without MySpace, we wouldn't have a lot of social media. So people can say that MySpace or kids don't give a shit about MySpace. Let's not bring up
that top 8.
But trendsetters.
Yeah, I don't know. That's not my genre, I think, also. So I have not ever been impressed by anything like that ever since.
Yeah,
like a Paranormal Activity, and As Above, So Below. Like, these ones that are in this style, I just don't like them.
See, I find them entertaining only because, and I'm not saying that I love all found footage. I actually probably dislike a ton of, more than half of it. But what I do like about them is they don't have the typical horror crutches of a soundtrack and a score and being able to use musical cues to get the audience to jump. So I feel like does me, the audience
jump? I get what you're saying. I would probably argue the opposite, actually, that one of the things I love about horror films is a score, is a sound effect or a film style that makes you follow it in a certain way or whatever. I love that. I think that music is a critical part of any piece of film work, personally. So I have a hard time with that. But beyond that, I didn't jump ever. Not a once. And
no, I'm not saying that because of the lack of that, it gets you to jump. I'm saying that typical horror films utilize jump scares and they're like, but I mean, get you to jump.
Let me rephrase. What is scary about it?
For this, this is one. There are multiple films like this where I will say, looking back on it, it wasn't scary. It didn't leave a lasting impression. It didn't make me jump. But while I was watching it, I was on edge the entire time. Granted, when I saw it, I was 14, 15.
But like, using an example that's maybe you didn't see when you were 14 or 15, maybe it's a Paranormal Activity, maybe it's an As Above, So Below, similar vibes. Those things didn't make me tense at all. And including as well.
Okay.
Like, I was not tense.
That's fair.
Wasn't on edge. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was hoping something would happen.
Yeah.
But I didn't expect it to.
I mean, that's fair. Like, for me, Paranormal Activity, for example, that movie put me on every time it became nighttime in that film. I was like, I buckled in. I was just like, here we go.
I just wanted something to happen.
That's fair.
And I didn't feel like anything happened, and I was so bored. So I would absolutely not have this on my list. I would yank this off my list.
Totally fair. I think that for me, I remember watching it, and actually this is going to be tied into another fun fact of, I remember watching it, and for me, I was on edge of every time they were looking around at nighttime. I was expecting to see something. Whereas you say you were waiting on something to happen, I was on edge because I thought something would happen. It never did. But fun fact is that there is a scene in the film where they are running through the forest, and the producers, I'm sure everybody knows this, but if you didn't, essentially what they did was they put the 3 actors in the forest, and as Mackenzie said, most of it was improvised, and they would get notes that said, hey, we need you to go to this location, this is what you're going to do tonight, we need you to react to this, go.
Yeah.
And they were told, hey, this night, get out of your tent, run, like this direction.
Run, yeah.
They had set up a creature type fixture there that was supposed to represent the Blair Witch, and you were going to get a glimpse of it. And they weren't, the actors were improvising, so they just sprinted right past it. You didn't see it on camera.
See it at all.
So like for me, while I was watching it, that's what I was waiting for, was like, oh, I'm going to see something. So I remember being on edge the whole time. And at the end, I was like, that was a letdown.
Yeah.
So for that reason, we can jump forward a little bit. It's not in my top 10.
Oh, thank God.
Even though we've disagreed on whether I don't think I would rewatch it, but my first time through, I was like, I get it. No.
Yeah.
I saw it when I was 15.
No,
I might have watched it one more time when I was like 17, but I wouldn't.
This was my first time, so that's why I was curious. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not going to make my top 10. I think that if you've never seen it, I think we just ruined it for you. Now you're going to be like, oh, I can just be on my phone because nothing's going to happen.
If you've never seen it, I don't recommend it. There were a lot of rite of passage films that I'm sure lots of us have missed, a film that we think is a rite of passage film. This is one that culturally, in the pop culture of the time and of my generation, feels like something you should watch. So I wasn't upset about watching it, at least to start, but I would never watch it again. And yeah, I would say that if you feel obligated to watch it, I don't think you should. Nothing happens.
You know what you should watch, though, is Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2.
No. Anything Blair Witch related can fuck right off. No.
All right.
I saw that come up on my suggested afterward, and I was like, no, thank you.
So what are you going to bump into this spot here on your list?
Oh, I have so many choices, to be honest. I can't let it not end up on the list, so I'm going to go with, not related at all, but I'm going to go with The Omen. The original Omen.
It's all for Damien, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
That shit is so good.
Yeah.
It is exorcist style vibes of that classic filmmaking.
Yeah.
With that horror twinge, also like on-set horror stories, really gnarly stories that came out of that. Some deaths arguably related to that film. So a lot of interesting production stories and value, but also a real story to it, and very beautifully shot and well acted, and an interesting plot, and rooted in some mysticism, some theology kind of vibes. But I just love it. I think it's creepy. I think the kid is creepy in just the right way. The casting is so well done. The scene where his head gets, there's no fucking arguing that. That is some incredible, it's terrifying stuff. And I wouldn't even say that I think it's like super scary, but if you were to think about things that like put me a little on edge, give me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies, a little bit, that kind of has it the whole way through. It doesn't really let up.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that like tension throughout. I think that's such a classic. I can't believe it's not on this list.
Yeah. It's an unsettling film. For the record, it's not on my list, but while I was watching The Exorcist, I realized how much I've confused The Omen and The Exorcist over the course of my life, because both have children involved, both deal with a satanic cult type thing, and I was like, I remember turning on The Exorcist and being like, is this the one where the guy gets decapitated?
Yeah.
And Janelle was like, what are you talking about? So, yeah, I've confused the two. I enjoy both. The Omen is not on my list, but very unsettling. And that's another one where I think that a lot of modern day horror misses out on the nuances of make it a story that people are going to be afraid of in their day-to-day life. And I think that folks having kids and not knowing how your kid is going to grow up and what kind of person they're going to turn out to be, that's
you
fucking
can raise
scary.
a Damien. You know what I'm saying? You could raise a Damien by accident. And I think this triggers into some very realistic fears. Everything that happens here is rooted in something normal, something day-to-day, something that you encounter in your real life that is, of course, upended by the supernatural for sure. But it's not, I don't know, something magical didn't kill you. Like a witch didn't appear out of nowhere and decapitate the guy. Something somewhat natural and human it did it. And, of course, other things happened to make that happen. But I think it's reasonably creepy in your normal day-to-day world and day-to-day life to watch it and have it like really weird you out, creep you out. And Gregory Peck, like, classic. Like, we love a Gregory Peck anything, I think, personally. And this is one of his later films. And I love the, like, seeing the shift of him, too, into a horror movie.
Yeah, when he's not busy killing mockingbirds, he's letting all his friends get killed by the devil. Yeah. You still get some, obviously, horror films with big name stars in them, but it's rare nowadays that you get a seasoned actor or actress who's, I'm going to go do this spooky piece over here. But yeah, I enjoy The Omen. Not the one that I'm going to go with, though. I'm actually going to... in the string of trying to replace the movies, and actually, fun fact, I think this is the last one that I'm going to replace on the list. So the rest of them I pretty much agree with, but in the interest of having some sort of thematic connection from the one I'm going to replace to the one that I'm putting in there, if you're talking about isolation and sort of paranoia, I don't know that there is a better one than The Thing with Kurt Russell. So that's what I'm going to opt for here, of just a bunch of people in an Arctic base, and there's some sort of weird alien parasite, whatever you want to call it, that is very invasion of the body snatchers and takes over and is trying to imitate everyone, and you don't know who to trust. I think that's a little better of a job, and you get a little more happenings than you do in the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, I think that's a way more interesting plot than the Blair Witch Project. And Kurt Russell is always a gem. We love him.
Yes.
We think he's a good one. I support that. So that would make your top 10, though, is what you're saying.
I think so. I think in recent years, it's become more of a rewatch for me. That one actually jumps between, do I want to watch this in October? Do I want to watch it when it's cold outside? Because again,
I was going to say, it's like an
I know,
Antarctic
I'm
thing,
kind of going
like,
against my own opinion of why I put The Shining in December, but I had to pick one or the other. So I'm going to be a hypocrite and say that I'll watch The Thing because just the visual effects, like practical effects are something that just, I don't know when we stopped doing it, but geez, what you can do with just a really good effects artist, whether it be a Savini or someone else, just what you can do with those, pulling some rubber apart and having some green spray or red spray, and it's insane.
My only problem with that movie is the villainization of a dog. I don't appreciate it. I'm a big fan of the dogs. I think it's aggressive. But yes,
okay.
I think it's a good movie.
But you don't, what's the language that they're speaking at the beginning? I'm going to feel so bad that I can't remember. It's not Polish. It's not Russian. But either way, if you spoke that, you would know it. Spoiler, at the beginning, they say it's not a dog. Don't trust. So you shouldn't feel bad because it's not a dog.
Yeah, but it looks like a dog, and I don't appreciate the visual.
That's
Pick
fair.
something else.
That's
I
fair.
love a dog. Shout out to Ash, my baby boy.
He's
sleeping
over
right
there,
over here next
doing his
to us.
best.
He heard us talking about dogs, and he popped up. Just saying.
So yeah, totally enjoy The Thing. Highly recommend that one. You get a lot of the people being slowly picked off, and then I love the ending as well. Of you don't really know at the end who is infected, who is not infected. It's just a very choose your own ending.
I do like it. I think it's an interesting plot. I would not make my top 10 for sure, but I do get it. So next one we have on the list in order again is But.
Which it
is. I don't know. It is the 2017 It. Chapter 1, part 1. Is it chapter 1, part 1? I guess it is chapter 1. You're right. Chapter 1, chapter 2. So this is chapter 1. And this was 2017. And for me personally, I'll kick us off here because this was therapy for me. As I mentioned previously, I watched a ton of horror movies from a very young age in a really weird circumstance. And I actually, didn't react to most of them, or I don't know, built up a tolerance really quickly. But one of the ones that did get to me was It.
Yeah.
It also was not helped by my mom, thanks mom, literally forcing me to dress up as a clown for Halloween shortly after this. And it was like one of those horrifying ones, not an It one, but it was just like one of those horrifying clown costumes that is traumatizing just to look at yourself in the mirror. So I don't think the combo of these two.
Can you share photos of this on the social?
That's a great
Do
question.
they
Mom,
exist?
send me some pictures. We'll ask Mom. She's got all the photo albums. This was before you youngins. We used to print photos, and they lived in albums that you had to go back and look at. So we'll find those maybe, but it was fucking horrifying is what I can tell you.
Fair.
I remember the moment looking in the mirror and being like, I'm one of these people who, if I'm scared, I'm silent.
Yeah.
I don't scream. I don't react. I have like silent freak out. And I'm that way to this day. And so I just remember looking in the mirror and being like, oh my God. Like, it just totally freezing up. So not a fan. Was not a fan. I love and respect Tim Curry. Obviously, we think he does great work. But that movie fucked me up. And so then I watched 2017 to make myself get over it, actually. I was like,
you can't be still scary.
I can't still be scared of fucking clowns. Move the fuck on, kid. And so I did. I actually think it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm teasing, but I think it worked. I thought it was, but I think it's a testament to how well it was done.
Yeah.
Actually, I thought it was so well done. It was a good adaptation. It was true to the source material, which is, by the way, not the film. It's the story. Mm-hmm. But I think it was really true to the source material. The characters were really engaging and interesting. They picked great kids for this. They picked some really endearing kids for this. And I just thought it was really well shot. And so I watched the whole thing this time just with interest. I think, more than being just scared and on edge and blah, blah, blah. And I really enjoyed it. And I was really excited to even see chapter 2. And I watched chapter 2 and I loved it. And I ended up liking this whole reboot.
Okay.
Honestly.
We differ there because I really did not enjoy chapter 2. That's a different conversation for a different day. But in thinking about that, originally I was going to leave this off my top 10. Because I still have a bad taste in my mouth, because I thought this one set up for so much of a strong conclusion, and I really didn't love the route. Speaking of like practical effects or lack thereof, I didn't love the amount of CGI in the second one. I thought that masked a lot of the scares, and I don't know, it became formulaic in the second one to me. But anyway, the reason I left it on mine wasn't necessarily because I feel like there are a bunch of movies I could put in this one's place. I could replace it with any piece of the Romero trilogy. I could go zombies and Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. I could replace it with the Dawn of the Dead remake. Though that my bread and butter, I could throw that into this spot, but I think because I said at the beginning of this last week of I want it to have some variety in there. Yeah. I think this is a fantastic. It's got a little bit of supernatural. It's got clowns. It's got like family stories and stories about really dark shit of like abuse and just these terrible situations these kids are going through in their personal lives.
Every time.
Sorry?
Is it Stephen King? Man,
yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. He knows what to do. So that's why I left it there. Was I'm just like, dude, I can't find a knock on chapter 1. No. And the fact that I didn't love chapter 2, but I still, this stands alone. Even if you end it there, it's great.
You don't have to see chapter 2 to enjoy this at all. Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. Yeah, I think it was a surprising admission to this list for me because of just everything we've said about the list so far, but also that it wasn't the original was a standout to me, like that it would be the 2017 version. But again, I attribute that to how well it was remade, I thought, and the casting and the production value and everything. So I totally get it. I think it's very well done. I have since gone back and rewatched the original.
How's that doing?
That's good. I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's not... It's hard to say if it's as good because I definitely, like I said, I have a bias against that one.
I was going to say but like Tim Curry, people were pissed when they said they were going to remake it, and
fucking Pennywise. Like he does an incredible job. But I do think he lived up to it.
Yeah. Skarsgård.
Yeah. Skarsgård did an incredible job living up to this.
And I like how neither of us said the first name. I think it's
Bill.
Okay, Bill Skarsgård. Okay.
Yeah. But no, I do think that it lived up to it, and I was surprised at that.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have thought that and not just from a creepy standpoint, from a, like, Tim fucking creeped me the fuck out. Am I going to be as alarmed and scared by this person? Right. And, like, for sure.
Yeah.
Just the way that he spoke and how well he did it. And I like that it kind of terrors all the kids in these different ways. And I really liked it. I think it's good. I think it's got a solid spot on the list. I think it's a solid top 10 placement.
I've got no problems with it. And the way that I typically remember, so obviously on my list, there's been a lot of just enjoyable films, right? Things that I like to watch, whether they're super scary or super funny horror comedies. it's things I enjoy watching, but another sort of way that I gauge the impact of a horror film on my own psyche is just what sticks with me. Like when I think about a movie, do images or scenes jump out to my memory? And with this one, just that initial scene of like, Georgie with the sailboat and like in that bright yellow slicker rain jacket, and his death scene next to that sewer grate of him being dragged in and the pool of blood going into the water. It's just an incredible shot.
Visually.
Yeah, just crazy. One of the movies that I would, if I had to replace this one for, again, this is totally personal because, again, another semi-divisive film, but like The Ring is one where when I think about The Ring, I don't want to rewatch it just because there's 2 to 3 images in that film that stick with me all these years later. And so to me, if a movie has that impact on me of I remember this and it freaks me the F out, that shows that it's a great horror film and it has that.
Yeah. No, I love The Ring as well, side note. But yeah, I totally agree. So I think we agree that should stay on the list. It's a really solid choice for this. I think the next one up, so it's our penultimate choice.
So we've got 2 left.
We only got 2 left. Penultimate choice is Halloween, 1978.
With Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, I was going to say famous appearance of Jamie Lee Curtis in the Halloween series.
I thought it was Jimmy. It's not Jimmy Lee Curtis.
Jamie.
The same one that was in True Lies.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay.
This is groundbreaking information for you, isn't
I
it?
thought his name was Jimmy the whole
Also,
time.
True Lies is really great.
That's on my list. I'm adding it to my list.
No, but okay, so this is going to be controversial.
Oh, jeez.
I'm not saying I would remove it. Let me just start there. Nobody get upset about it. Yeah. I'm not saying I would remove it. I also understand Michael Myers is a horror villain legend.
Yeah.
I don't find this that entertaining. I don't find it that interesting.
I think that's fair.
It's real tropey. She does an okay.
Okay, but wait.
She does an okay job.
Okay, like, but so to interrupt here, you say tropey.
Yeah.
But how many of the tropes that you're invoking were started by this film because it was like one of the first slashers?
Well, 2 things. One, I agree with you. I think that's a fair bit of feedback. But I was just not that intrigued by it. I wasn't that interested in it. I will say I didn't see this, I don't know, till much later in my horror watching career, so to speak. It was definitely not one of the first. I think I was in my late teens, early 20s by the time I actually saw this.
Okay.
And I wasn't super impressed at that point. So I cannot discount that is probably influenced by that.
I would also argue that the entire, and this is where we disagreed on Cabin in the Woods, but I would argue that the point of the Jamie Lee Curtis, the Laurie Strode character, is that it's not an archetype. She's meant to be the entire, discounting 20-something goddamn sequels, the entire point of Michael Myers was that there was no purpose behind what he was doing. He wasn't stalking a specific, it wasn't that 80s joke of, oh, if you drink or smoke or have sex, like Jason's gonna get you. It wasn't that she had done anything wrong. It was that she was just this normal, not a nerdy girl, not a cool popular girl, not a jock, not any of these archetypes. She was just the girl that happened to be there that night.
She's the girl next door.
I don't consider her that. She smokes in the film. I think she should. It's not. I mean, granted, you compare her to her friends, maybe in the movie, she's the most innocent of the bunch, but she's not pristine.
She's just like, but that's what I mean. No fucking teenage girl is. Like, whatever universe we live in that makes people think that is bullshit, right? Yeah. Every teenage girl tries a few things, is a little...
You hear that, girls? Mackenzie's telling you how to behave.
Listen, I was a lot more edgy than y'all, so don't worry about it. No judgment. But I just mean, every girl fucks with some shit. She tries a cigarette. She messes around with some dude under the bleachers. Like, the girl next door is a trope that is not rooted in any real reality, but I just mean she's that kind of prototypical American Midwestern girl, right? She's in fucking Illinois, and some random guy breaks out of a mental hospital and just goes on a killing spree. And there's nothing that unique about it to me, but also there's no to me, there's no reason that he would go after her or anyone else. I'm not looking for that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying he's just had a mental breakdown. He's broken out of an asylum, whatever it is his story is about. And he's just killing willy-nilly. Willie Nelson, willy-nilly, same difference. But it's just not that alarming or surprising to me, I think. Like, people killing indiscriminately is not surprising to me. There being no motivation for it, not surprising to me. I'm like, this is just a mental patient and or sociopath who just wants to kill.
Do you think at any point of that, though, is
not surprising?
Do you think at any point, like, any part of that is just being desensitized, unfortunately, with how many random killings happen
for sure, I think
contemporarily?
Like, I think you can't discount when I saw this, which is again late teens, early 20s, and we've established I saw a lot of gnarly shit by then.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, I love true crime. Like, we also, even just in real life, are exposed to news articles and things and all kinds of just, gnarly things that happen in real life of people, just killing for no reason and being desensitized to both the art and the real life around that. So, yeah, I don't know if that informed my viewing experience, but I didn't find it super interesting.
I mean, that's fair. I think that it's the fact that it feels random. Would be my assumption is that at this point in time, and this was one of the first slashers, if not the first. I know people say we can talk about Texas Chainsaw in a second, but as far as other slashers in the genre, it's like these people are going out to the woods, or they're going off alone and having sex, or they're doing this. Whereas in this one, it's like these people haven't done anything. They're just living their day-to-day lives, and suddenly this killer shows up and starts like demolishing them. So to me, I understand why nowadays it's he's killing randomly. That's like a common occurrence. But I think in 1978, I believe, when it came out, that was pretty scary of just, somebody could just show up on Halloween night in a mask and start cutting up the neighborhood.
I do think that could be. I mean, it's scary when anybody cuts up the neighborhood for any reason, right? Like, shouldn't be a normal thing by any means. But I never watched actually any of the sequels because I didn't find any of this super interesting. But like, he keeps fucking coming for her, and I'm aware of that just in the pop culture of it all, and that this reappears and becomes a running theme. And I'm just like, why?
So it's interesting. I think I'm not a huge Halloween fan. I'm not a huge fan of the franchise. I have friends who are
going to be very upset when they hear this.
It's okay. I appreciate them. I've seen almost all of them, but if I ranked it, it wouldn't be in my top 2 of the slasher bunch. Maybe not my top 3. But with Halloween, it's interesting because I think it's the only one where basically you can pick your own path of lore, because different sequels follow different rules. Yeah. So if you follow the earlier, it turns out, Laurie Strode was Michael's sister. Like, they reveal that early on. Yeah. And you're like, okay, but then Laurie Strode disappears after the second one. And then when it comes back to then they do a bunch of shitty sequels. And then at H2O...
why does he have to kill his sisters? Like, whatever.
It's fine. But I'm just, going into a bit of, if you want a reason behind it, here you go. And then in H2O, it turns out, yes, he does come back to her. But I don't think they do any of that in
this, is what I'm saying. I don't think that they give a good reason...
But that's the point.
In this, but I don't find that interesting.
If you don't find it interesting, that's fine.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I would like at least some modicum of a story other than this guy lost his mind and went and started stabbing people. And again, I could watch it for 20 minutes. I can watch it for 30 minutes, like whatever. 2 hours of this is too much for me.
I get where you're coming from. I think not to go down a super dark path. I really don't want to do that. But I think that to the average person, not just the average female, but the average person, thinking, I've pissed somebody off in my life enough that they're gonna murder me, that's one thing. To think that there's somebody who doesn't even know you and has no reason to want to kill you, but they're gonna come stab you to death, that to me is infinitely scary. So maybe that's the point.
Maybe that is why. I don't know. And again, that would make sense with a lot of like true crime that you hear out there of just that fear of somebody random coming to get you.
No reason, just you were there.
Maybe that's why. I mean, it sounds like there's maybe some reasons in the later ones, but I would personally take this off my list. It would definitely not be number 2. I understand why in film, like you said, just the ways in which it changed the stories that are out there and the way that it was shot and all of that. I get it. I respect it as a film. It's not personally enjoyable for me, so I'm not going to watch it every October. I'm not going to watch it for Halloween. I would absolutely replace it with, gosh, a bunch of others. But one of the first ones that comes to mind is I love The Lost Boys. I think this is... I love Lost Boys. It's not quite a 70s, it's an 80s flick, but it's such a classic. Kiefer Sutherland, it's 87, Jason Patric. It is both fun and an interesting story and well shot and a great soundtrack and quintessential 80s film. And I could watch it like over and over. So I would absolutely replace this with that personally.
That's a fair choice. Also, Cry Little Sister, banger of a song. And I would also be remiss to not say that it gets mentioned in the movie Us. If you've never seen Us, there's a little shout out to Lost Boys at the beginning of that. I don't have a ton to say about The Lost Boys. I've seen it twice, maybe, and I enjoy it. Not a big vampire guy, if you can't tell by my list.
See, you're a zombie guy, and I'm a vampire girl.
I'm a zombie guy.
I'm not a zombie girl. I'm a vampire girl.
Give me a zombie or a guy in a mask murdering people. That's usually my go-to.
Any vampire movie, that's my go-to for sure. I also love that, like, Jason Patric is turning into a vampire, doesn't realize, asks the girl who 100% knows that he's turning into a vampire. And she's, I can't tell you, but you know what we can do? We can totally have sex right now. And
every guy would fall for that, though. I need to distract him for 2 to 3 minutes.
Right.
Let's have sex.
Listen, you know what? I can make him not focus on him changing into a vampire. If I just have sex with him, he will be fine. It's beautiful, and it's, again, so 80s.
The sex scene
is
beautiful.
The scene in general of, like, her just coming to him and being like, I can't tell you, and just physically where it's all shot and everything. And then, the sex scene, like, they have this beautiful quintessential 80s sex scene. I feel like
I think we just discovered a future top 10 episode most beautiful sex scenes in film. Let's continue on. So Halloween, it's not my favorite of the bunch, but I pay homage to what it did for the genre, so that I'm gonna stick with it on my list for now.
I respect it. I understand the choice. We're gonna close it out now with the number one. We went on a lot of rants. We apologize, but also we don't. So the number one is not what you're gonna expect. I didn't expect it. You didn't expect it.
I want you to think in your head right now, like after hearing all of these selections. So I'm going to list them out from 10 to 2 right now for everyone. We go Scream, Halloween Town, The Exorcist, The Blair Witch Project, It, The Witches, Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and Halloween. I want you to pick any movie in your head of what you think is going to be number one on this CBS
and I guarantee you,
product of entertainment online, only streaming films. What's gonna be number one? And you're not gonna
and you're gonna be fucking wrong.
Yeah. So Mackenzie, what do we got here?
Number one, drum roll please. What We Do in the Shadows, 2014.
The motion picture, not the
TV show, which has since come out. That's why I say 2014. But it is.
It's on there.
It is not my number one. It is not, I think, any number one that anybody would expect. Is it? Here's my. I'm gonna quickly summarize my opinions about this. One, again, hearkening back to the Cabin in the Woods conversation earlier, where I was like, I didn't know it was a joke, and so I couldn't enjoy it.
Right.
I knew coming into this, it is a joke. I was super able to enjoy it. It is fucking hilarious.
Facts.
There's no argument. It is hilarious. It's beautifully shot. It's so creative. It's such a creative concept. I love the originality of it.
Yeah.
It's very hard to find an original idea these days, and I love that for us here. It is so fucking funny. But is it a Halloween number one? Absolutely not.
Number one, hard no. But I mean, the fact that this film from New Zealand, I'm not sure of the extent of the production company. Maybe it's just because I'm an ignorant American. I assume it was a semi-indie production. It seems low budget. But the fact that this spurred like a television series with none of the same actors, but similar stories and like the producers, writers, etc. And it continues. It's like season 5 at this point, and I love all of it.
Yeah.
it just speaks volumes to how creative Taika Waititi
I
and
was going
Jermaine
to say,
Clement.
this is an Erla Taika Waititi Oscar winner, but I mean, like, it's now that we especially know him even better, it's so on brand and hilarious and his style and all of that. But I think this was, again, one of the earlier appearances of that his work and that kind of work into for American audiences at the very least. And again, it was so creative. It was so original. It was so well done. It was so funny. And as you said, it inspired this whole new series, which I admit I have not seen, but I love that they have taken it and run. I imagine it's very funny. It's on the list. Gonna watch it. But this is so fucking hilarious. It's like turning the reality TV genre on its head. It's just also just funny, but it's beautifully costumed. It's beautifully shot. And for such a low budget, especially, like, the production value is so great. I loved it. I think it's a really great movie. I would absolutely recommend it to anybody who wanted to see it. I remember being forced into watching this, by the way. This was not something I wanted to see when I first saw it. When it came out, one of my best friends, she made me do it. And man, was she right. And I loved it. But no, it wouldn't, not only would it not be number one for me, it wouldn't be on the top 10. I wouldn't watch this. Would not watch this every Halloween. This is not the vibe that I'm going for when I say top Halloween-y kind of movies, creepy movies, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, speaking to like the overarching vibe we've been talking about. Like, I'm not looking for a funny movie when I'm chilling and watching my Halloween stuff.
We've got different vibes. I think this one for me mirrors what I said about Shaun of the Dead. Of it takes the zombie genre, pays homage, still makes a great film out of it, but gives you some laughs and references along the way. So I really do enjoy this one. I mean, I could sit here and talk about just... It's like joke after joke. It's perfectly scripted. I feel like you get a giggle every 10 to 15 seconds in this.
Yeah.
Just perfectly paced. There is a story. It's got some emotional pull there with Iago and him wanting to date this woman who's now in a nursing home. This person he fell in love with when she was in her 20s. And he's had to watch her grow old. You get that component. You get the friendship component. I also love that it's funny,
though, where people wonder why she's dating somebody 6 times her age or whatever it was.
Yeah, robbing the cradle. Yeah. So, yeah, I thoroughly enjoy this one. I saw it on a whim. All I knew was Jermaine Clement was involved, and I knew him from Flight of the Conchords. I don't know what it is about New Zealanders, man, but they get me. That style of humor.
They're funny.
Yeah.
They're funny. I love that humor. It's that unexpected, I don't know, left hook. Like, you don't think you don't know it's coming, and it's funny. So yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a really great film. I don't think it personally would be on the list. Now, replacing it with any one thing is going to be very hard for me. Like I told you earlier, my top 10 is really more like a top 15, which is cheating. I know. Oh my God. Okay. But I think one of the ones I haven't mentioned yet, I can't even do this. Is so hard. I think one of the ones I haven't mentioned that I would really want to be on here is a Sleepy Hollow.
Okay.
I love a Sleepy Hollow.
Jonathan Depp in there.
Yeah, Johnny Depp, that fella. This is it has a very similar vibe to another movie that, I shouldn't say a similar vibe, but just a spooky vibe that he likes, which is another one he does is From Hell. That's another one that's an honorable mention for me. Jack the Ripper story. Either one of those honestly could plug in here. But Sleepy Hollow is just that classic story again that I love, and it's beautifully shot, and it's got some incredible people in it, and it's one that holds up for me when I watch it over and over. So that for sure is one. But yeah, I have a half dozen other honorable mentions: From Hell, Practical Magic, a bunch of these guys. But if I absolutely had to pick to replace one, probably a Sleepy Hollow feels like it's missing for me.
That's a solid pick. I think I only saw Sleepy Hollow maybe twice. But that's another one. Refresh my memory. Is that the one that has the, like, witch jump scare at the very beginning? Am I making that up?
No, there's a jump. It's not the very beginning, but yeah, there is an early jump scare for sure.
Because that's one that does stick with me. Assuming I'm thinking of the right movie.
I think you are.
Of The Witch in the Forest. Yeah, okay. So again, I don't remember a ton about that movie, but it stuck with me. So in my head, I'm like, dude, Sleepy Hollow is fucking scary.
It sticks with you. I mean, The Headless Horseman, it sticks with you. But it's a Washington Irving novel, and it's so beautifully. It's such a great adaptation of it as well, and beautifully shot, and again, really good music as well. I love the score to that. And it's gross. Like, it doesn't It doesn't shy away from the gore at all. But I also don't think it's overly gory. I think it's appropriately gory. So I really love that as a Halloween flick. But yeah, I also watch Practical Magic every single year. Both of those I've already watched. It's October 19th is when we're recording this. And I've already watched both of those this year. So this month.
Yeah. If I'm being honest, and maybe we end up cutting this, who knows? But I feel like we didn't do, I know that it's not on your list, but according to Joel, number 1 is What We Do in the Shadows, and I don't think we've discussed it enough. So I would like to just know, what other gags or lines from the film stick with you? What are your favorite jokes, even if it's not on your top 10? Anything else that stands out to you from What We Do in the Shadows?
As far as gags, like, I love when they're like innocently showing the cops around and think that this is all super normal and they're just showing them around. I love that scene.
But his soul is in hell.
Yeah. And I love his thing, like I said, about the robbing the cradle. That's one of my favorites. I like when he's giving Taika Waititi's character is like giving the tour and opening the door, and there's this like orgy happening on the wall.
Yeah, that's a reference to not Interview with a Vampire. Is that?
It should be Interview with the Vampire.
Bram Stoker's Dracula, maybe?
It could be either one, to be honest.
Yeah, like otherworldly, the bed is on the wall kind of view.
But it's very like prototypical vampire vibes, but it also feels like weirdly innocent in that context, even though it's obvious what it is. It's far enough away, and the way it's presented is very funny. It's almost like these vignettes of these classic vampire stories as they're giving this tour. So,
I think that was intentional
it was,
too.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Because they talk about what era each of the vampires was made a vampire, and so that that sort of
what's
plays.
His face who's like, he's like a vampire for 2 months.
Nick?
Nick. And he's just like popping off and he's so annoying and I do really like it. I think it's very funny, but I didn't rewatch it for this one. But those are the main ones that stand out. But circling back, that what would you replace it with, or would you keep it on the list?
Which one was yours again?
I did Sleepy Hollow instead of What We Do in the Shadows. But would you replace it? Would you keep it? What would you do?
For me, it would feel like sacrilege to not include either a George Romero film, a Sam Raimi film. There are a handful of other folks who it's like, to not have one of them on my list would just be, it would piss a lot of people off. So with that in mind, I'm going to leave What We Do in the Shadows on my list. I think I'm going to put it, it's not going to be at number 1. It's not going to be at number 1. I'll put it at 8 through 10 somewhere. But if you've never seen this, I understand it's not super scary, but this is one that I will watch every single year. It's got incredible rewatchability. It's hilarious. It's got a couple little scares here or there. I think everyone should watch it. So just for the reach that I have of the 6 people that are going to listen to this podcast, watch What We Do in the Shadows. I'm going to throw it into my top 10 just so that people will go see it.
I love it. I feel like we need a part 3 to this. You know what I mean?
Eventually, these are all the things we forgot to mention. But there are so many good, scary films out there. So make an effort. We probably forgot a lot. Let us know which ones we left out if we didn't mention them at all. Yeah.
We'll also hopefully we'll make it to this time next year and we'll do another one. Thank you so much for joining us for our inaugural handful of episodes. Come back next week where we are going to talk some Quentin Tarantino. We're going to do a little bit of a face-off kind of conversation.
He didn't direct that, for the record.
He did not direct that. But we're going to face off a couple of his works. I think we're going to talk some Inglourious Bastards and some Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. For my end, thank y'all for joining us for the first few weeks of this podcast. But also, you're welcome, because if you're a horror movie person, we just helped you extend spooky season by a whole week.
And you're not done with spooky season. At least I'm not anyway.
No.
Thanks for hanging out. All right. Again, thanks for joining us. Go now, have a drink, and watch a thing. Cheers.
Cheers.